The hardest thing to do in business, building an efficient organization. Part 3. Always pay your workers first. From the post of Dr. Strive Masiwa. You can't call yourself an entrepreneur if you have the habit of not paying your workers on time, erratically or not at all. Real business leaders always pay their employees first. Let's call it the first law of entrepreneurship. Let's talk. I began my business career as a construction contractor more than 30 years ago. My business entailed getting construction contracts, some which took several years to complete. I would sometimes have thousands of people working on my projects. 90% of my people were paid on a weekly basis. It was almost a ritual whereby we would go to the bank on Friday morning to collect the payroll. Each worker was paid in cash, and we would sit and pack the money into little brown envelopes. After deducting taxes, we would then travel to the sites and pay them their money. I never ever missed a payroll except once, and it probably saved my life. I was abducted from my office at gunpoint on one of my payroll days. The person who raised the alarm that I was missing said this: "We know something has happened to him because he didn't come to supervise the release of this week's payroll." If you owe your workers money, you are not yet an entrepreneur. The second law of successful entrepreneurship is this: if for any reason you are going to miss your payroll, you must always make sure the lowest paid workers are the first to get paid. Managers and others you deem most skilled. Always pay the lowest paid workers first. They are the most vulnerable. If we didn't have enough money to meet our payroll, I spoke to my senior people and asked them to make the sacrifice. It all meant I myself would go home with nothing, but workers like cleaners, laborers, we had a lot of them in the construction business, drivers, etc., were always paid first. This always included the youngest people in our business. Treat workers' salaries and wages as a sacrosanct. If you see a big man who has lots of cars, a big house, goes on holiday overseas, but in his arrears on salaries and wages, he is really not an entrepreneur. Don't be fooled. He is not a big man at all. True entrepreneurs pay their people on time, all the time, and they take care of the most vulnerable members of their organizations first. I would rather someone called me as a successful entrepreneur on the basis that I never missed my payroll than on the basis that I made $1 billion. Now, to help avoid such a crisis, there is one thing you must learn to do straight away in your business, and that's manage your cash flow, your accounts receivables, sales, and your accounts payable, expenses. If you don't keep track of your cash flow, I guarantee at the end of some months you will have a shortfall. If you haven't already done so, put together a cash flow budget with a few different scenarios, best case, worst case, different assumptions. You can't predict everything, of course, and surprises happen, but do your best with what you know now. Cash in, cash out, timing. Enough cash to meet payroll. This is a complicated subject, but we are just talking about payroll here. A few years ago, there was an article in Forbes magazine called "Success Will Come and Go, but Integrity is Forever." Never forget that all businesses have legal and contractual obligations which you must respect. But there are also moral obligations to consider. Do you know the difference? To be continued. Afterthought. The most famous American football coach, Vince Lombardi, once said, "It's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get up." There will be times when being an entrepreneurial leader will be really difficult. About such times in the Eagle in a Storm series. Steel yourself for hard work and prepare yourself for the hard decisions and sacrifices a big man or woman must make in times of challenge, because they will come. Jacinto writes, "Sir, I am now confused. I just read the book The Richest Man in Babylon, and it suggests that one must pay himself first, not the workers." My reply: I read the little book decades ago, and it is very good. It was written more than 100 years ago by an American Christian businessman. I believe he was talking about what we call dividend distribution today. It was not advocating that you do not pay your creditors, and particularly your workers, who must be paid first, as well as your taxes. You should only pay yourself after you have settled your obligations, including salaries and creditors. It is from the surplus that you pay yourself and your partners, if you have any. Afterthought 2. Relatives can be some of the most loyal employees in a small business. It is also easy to forget that they are employees who need to have a contract and must be paid a salary just like anyone else. Make sure you pay salaries even to that small cousin from the village who cleans the place. That little cousin deserves respect, and she has some dreams too, which need money. Afterthought 3. Every employee must have a written contract of employment. Even if that employee is your only employee or a relative, you will not become a big business if you don't learn the habits and the practices of a big business. If you go 1 week without paying the payroll, park your car at home and go to work on public transport. If you haven't paid the employees for more than 1 month, sell the car and pay them. I will never advise you to do something I never done myself. My staff at Econet, Zimbabwe will tell you I gave up my car for more than a year when things got tough, and yet I never missed my payroll obligation. People laughed at me and said Masiyiwa is broke. The newspaper wrote about it, but I never lost the respect of my employees, and they stuck with me. We shared a vision which burned deep in us. No one respects an entrepreneur who makes an exception of themselves, whilst asking others to sacrifice. What does a typical contract contain? When I started my business, I created a 1-page contract document for each employee. It had the following sections: 1. Your duties. 2. Your tasks. 3. Your responsibilities. 4. Your salary, any lawful deductions from salary, and payment date, working hours, holidays. Just simple bullet points, nothing legalistic. Then take each employee through it, and we would both sign. Even the cleaner and the relatives had this simple contract. I also used this 1-page template when recruiting people. After recruiting, I would turn it into a contract. Even if the person was not educated, and could not speak English, I still prepared and discussed the contract for them. If a person didn't have such a contract, I didn't want them hanging around the place, even as a volunteer or helper. This leads to an inefficient organization. You wouldn't necessarily need a lawyer for something like this, depending on your business and the type of job. Just a sense of fair play, and you can Google to find some draft contract language online. When you get bigger, and you will, if you adhere to professional management approach, you will soon hire HR people, etc. If you have a friend who knows HR, you can also seek their advice, but keep it simple and fair.